Wakey, and good morning. Many thanks indeed for joining us. Morning has broken and you bang on time for AM Live. Of course, today is In the Market, where we turn our focus on the issues that are, of course, in the market. And today it will be all about mainstreaming ethics, that is business ethics. And of course, you can see with me up and Dailies is the CEO of Jubilee Insurance. This is Dr. Ngetich. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I've always seen the soft copy on television. Now today, I meet the hard copy. Right? And Fatima as well. Maui, thank you for joining us this morning. We shall be discussing a lot here on AM Live just about business ethics, mainstreaming business ethics. There will be a huge conference next week. And of course, they'll be telling us more of this in the course of a program. We're eagerly awaiting for Patrick Obath also to join us. That is, will be much later in the course of a program. And as I've mentioned, of course, when we're talking about business ethics, it's all about also in this country a matter to do with corruption. And we know corruption epitomizes weakness in our ethical standards and integrity. To business, corruption increases the cost of doing business, creates unfair playing ground, and curtails efforts towards efficiency, improvement, innovations that could further promote profitability of the business. Now, in light of this, as I've mentioned earlier, KEPSA, that is also the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also the Center for International Private Enterprise will host a two-day conference in Nairobi from the 25th to 26th June on improving ethics to increase profitability. So we shall be discussing slicing that and a lot of other issues as far as corruption is concerned, and mainstreaming ethics, how pivotal it is for, of course, your business to be ethical. And of course, in light of this, we all know the world is moving towards the PPP, that is profit, planet, and people, and also business. They are accommodating this also in their practices as well. But that is much later in the course of the program. But you know the drill. We get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly in our dailies this morning. We begin with the Daily Nation. This is what is headlining the front page of the Daily Nation. Anxiety as Uhuru visits Ruto bastion. That is what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. The divisive issue of 2022 succession has created a rift between the two leaders. Just days after a diatribe against the Tanga Tanga movement, President Uhuru Kenyatta travels to the political stronghold of the deputy and the group's de facto patron, William Ruto, on a development tour to tense, or tour so tense, I should say, that some State House functionaries do not want the host, that is Kapsaret MP Oscar Sudi, anywhere near the microphone. That is what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation today. Also, 3 guilty of university terror attack in a period or in a packed courtroom in Nairobi yesterday. The words of the magistrate echoed with an irritant. It must be admitted that the scene of the attack was gory and traumatizing for any normal human being. The victims died a gruesome death, said Chief Magistrate Francis Andai, referring to the gruesome terrorist attack on Garissa University that killed 148 in 2015. I therefore find that the prosecution proved its case against Muhammad Ali Abdikadir, Hassan Eden Hassan, and Rashid Charles Mberesero beyond reasonable doubt for the offenses of conspiring to commit a terrorist act, murder, and being a member of the Al-Shabaab terrorism group. It has been a long journey, but closure for the victims is closed. This story, you have the full report on page 5 of the Daily Nation today. And of course, you can see a related picture as well on the front page of the Daily Nation. Hassan Eden Hassan, Muhammad Ali Abdikadir, Rashid Charles Mberesero, and Sahal Dirie at Milimani Law Courts in Nairobi yesterday. The court found Hassan Abdikadir and Mberesero guilty, but acquitted Dirie. You can follow that story, as I've mentioned, on page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Also, Mercy Masika's new gig at UN. Remember, today is the World Refugee Day as well. And the person that has a new gig as the refugee ambassador for the UN is the gospel musician. This is Mercy Masika. You have a story on page 12 of the Daily Nation this morning. Congratulations to her. Of course, we shall be giving you stories much later in the course of the program about the World Refugee Day as well. Let's move on and to see what we have also on the front page of the Standard. But before I go there, also, lawyer Asa Nyakundi rearrested. City lawyer accused of killing his son in March picked up from his office and detained for hours. at Directorate of Criminal Investigations before being moved to Kamukunji Police Station. You can follow this story also on page 11 of the Daily Nation this morning. The Standard is up next, and this is what you're waking up to today. Storm brews over junior secondary. That is what we have as a splash today on the front page of the Standard. It's all about matters academia. Leading teachers' unions divided on whether junior school should be in primary, secondary level, or if it should fall under an independent category. All the gritty details of this are on page 6 of the Standard today, and you have data on teachers, students, union and schools, primary schools there, junior schools and secondary schools. They're all listed on the front page of the Standard today. Also on page 10 of the Standard, US 2 billion shillings seized in Barclays was fake. That is, Gilbert Gann, an investigative specialist with the US Secret Service, tells court that the notes did not have security features for US dollars. You have this story continuing on page 10 of the Standard today. Also, sector grapples with low electricity demand. That is the challenge that the power industry faces, which is evident in government's downward review of planned power plans over the next decade. You can follow this story also in the Pullard magazine. That is a business segment inside the Standard this morning. A quick look also at what we have on the front page of the Star, and this is what you're waking up to this morning. Kenyans steal 150 million shillings from US counties. Somebody was caught there. That is Robert Muli, pleading guilty to wire fraud in Virginia. And it says Muli and his Kenyan associates emailed contacts pretending to be Dell employees asking for payments to be directed to new accounts. You can follow the story on page 2 of the Star. It's all about also Kenyans in diaspora, or Kenyans who are actually fraudsters. There's a standalone picture there of the 3 Garissa University attack suspects guilty. It says here is Hassan, Eden Hassan, Muhammad Ali, Abdikadir Rashid, Charles Mberesero, who were found guilty. You know the story now. You can follow the gritty details also inside the Star as well. Also, we have a cyber story here. It's all about a sex puzzle. A female athlete exposed as man in Eldoret. Eldoret police are investigating a shocking puzzle in which an international female athlete was discovered to be a man. This is Shiez Chepkoskei, who's 29, was arrested while masquerading as a nurse intern in the emergency department of the Moi Referral and Teaching Hospital. The athlete was charged in court last Monday for the offense of impersonating a nurse and was sent to Eldoret Women's Prison because she had been identified as a woman. However, officials at the prison discovered that the suspect was a man. On Tuesday morning, the suspect disclosed to prison authorities that he was a man but preferred to identify as a woman. Right? That is a story that you can follow on page 3. Right? In an age of transgender or, of course, sexual changes, that is a story that you want to follow on page 3 of the Star this morning. Not really sexual changes, but of course changing, of course, your human anatomy to be that of a woman or a man. That is the age that we are living in. Also, you can follow the story of a 4-year-old or 4-year-olds abusing drugs in school. This is a new report from Nakada. The story is tucked away on page 4 and 5 of the Star. And EACC probes Kitale man earning 129,000 and worth 300 million shillings. These are unanswered questions. You can follow the story on page 6 of the Star this morning. People Daily is up next, and this is what we have on the front page of the People Daily this morning. Let me just scroll there quickly for you to get the splash. This is what we have. How phone fix Garissa attackers. That is what we have also on the front page of the People Daily. How phone fix Garissa attackers. Justice served. Court finds 3 of the accused guilty of killing 148 students, staffers during terror raid on University College in 2015. You can follow the story on page 2 of the People Daily. Also, drama as Nyakundi arrested to face murder charge today is another story that you can follow on page 5 of the People Daily this morning. I have Taifa Leo for you, and this is what is the splash today on the front page of Taifa Leo. Ajira, Uhuru alivyotatiza mageuzi. That is what we have headlining the front page of Taifa Leo. Rais aliongeza mzigo wa utumishi wa umma kwa kuajiri CS or CAS kukosa kuvunja mashirika. That is a story that you can follow on page 2 of the Taifa Leo as well. And you can also follow the story there, or you can actually read the flagger there on top. It continues on page 2 of Taifa Leo. Allow me to cross over now to buckle down to business to see what the Business Daily is holding for us today. Insurers, 13.5 billion shillings boost from a new border cover. That is what we have on the front page of the Business Daily today. Budget proposal makes it compulsory for all motorcycles to buy insurance cover. Insurance companies are set to get 13 billion shillings cash boost from motorcycle operators following Treasury Secretary Henry Rotich's proposal to make it mandatory for border and tuk-tuk riders to procure, third-party cover. That story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily today. Also, counties to get cancer centers in new law is another story that you want to also follow. A bill under scrutiny in the Senate has proposed that all 47 counties set up cancer centers as part of the campaign to tame spread of the disease. This will also reduce the burden borne by the largest public referral institution, that is Kenyatta National Hospital. The Cancer Prevention and Control Amendment Bill 2019, which is before the Senate Standing Committee on Health, provides that every county should establish cancer centers and take charge in ensuring prevention, treatment, and control of the disease. You have a standalone picture here also on the front page of a Business Daily, and this is all about justice for Garissa victims. And there you have Hassan Eden Hassan, Rashid Charles Mberesero, and Mohammed Ali Abdikadir. Aside the story we have here as well, agencies miss Uhuru deadline for release of cargo. State agencies at Embakasi Inland Depot have missed a 3-week deadline imposed by President Uhuru Kenyatta to release goods imported by small traders. Over a month ago, the president ordered the immediate clearance of hundreds of cargo containers being held at the Inland Container Depot in Nairobi. However, just about 10% of the cargo had been cleared as at yesterday. Trade and Industrialization Secretary Peter Munya said 89 out of 514 containers had been released since May 27th directive. You can follow the story on page 4 of the Business Daily today. On the ticker, Magoha, VCs meet ahead of varsity mergers. Vice Chancellors of public universities have been summoned for an urgent meeting in Nairobi today that insiders say will set the stage for major reforms that could see some institutions merged and others closed down. This story continues on page 5 of the Business Daily. Today's digit is 148, and this is the number of people killed in terrorist attack at Garissa University College. Follow the story on page 2, and of course you can see a related picture there. This that were arraigned and were found guilty. These were the perpetrators. Also, Safaricom inked deal with Equity to lend suppliers. Safaricom and Equity Bank have reached a financing deal enabling the telcos contractors to access up to 200 million shillings unsecured short-term loans to manage cash flow positions ahead of payment. Follow the story on page 19 of the Business Daily. Allow us to cross over now to Uganda, where we can see also what is on the front page of the Daily Monitor and also the New Times. Let's begin in New Times. In Rwanda, where we have the New Times, and it says Rwanda to repeal all colonial laws. Rwanda to repeal all colonial laws. Government wants House to revoke up to 1,000 colonial era legal instruments. This story continues on page 4 of the New Times today. And also we have ties here. This is General Nyamvumba meeting top Turkish military brass. This is Rwanda Defense Force Chief of Defense Staff General Patrick Nyamvumba, who was yesterday hosted by Turkey's Minister of National Defense. This is General Hulusi Akar in Ankara. The talks were also attended by the Chief of General Staff of Turkish Armed Forces, General Yasa Gula, according to the Rwandan Embassy in Ankara. You can follow this story also inside the New Times if you are in Rwanda. Let's see what is happening in Uganda, if we may. And this is what is on the front page of the Daily Monitor this morning. I'm trying to trace my Daily Monitor here. It seems, let's see, there we go. Daily Monitor, the Bank of Uganda saga. 3 officials have been arrested, if you've been following this story. And say sources privy to the investigation say police have preferred charges of abuse of office and neglect of duty against the central bank officials. MPs now want Scotland Yard to intervene. You have this story continuing on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Monitor if you're waking up in Uganda. And prepare for tough times, IGG tells Nakalema. That is a story that you want to follow also inside the Daily Monitor. Is all about corruption, and the story continues on the page. Well, it's not very legible for me to see. It's a bit hazy, but you can follow the story also inside the Daily Monitor there. Also, Muhakanizi reshuffles accounting officers and doctors make U-turn now, praise government. And also inside the Metro, that is a pull-out magazine in the Daily Monitor, you have KCCA unveiling plan to upgrade Kampala roads. Also drama as Lukwago fights to stop suspects' guilty plea, and European envoys break silence on NGOs' graft. You can follow the story inside the Daily Monitor. This is happening in Uganda. Let me show you also what we have on the front page of the Citizen in Tanzania, and ex-ministers, how to boost revenue budget. This is what they're suggesting, ex-ministers, how to boost revenue budget funding. 2 former cabinet ministers urge the government to seek inexpensive loans and promote growth of the private sector to make it easier to finance its 33.1 trillion shillings budget for the financial year 2019-2020. The story continues on page 2 of The Citizen in Tanzania. We won't use DEDs in polls, says electoral body. The National Electoral Commission has said it will stick to the High Court decision which outlawed deploying district executive directors as returning officers. The story continues on page 2 of The Citizen this morning. Also another Dar landmark as new Selenda Bridge takes shape, and there you can see the picture there. Dar es Salaam Regional Commissioner Paul Makonda visited the site of the proposed new Selenda Bridge yesterday. The bridge is being built with South Korean assistance over a portion of the Indian Ocean as part of efforts to ease congestion on the city roads. So also that story is tucked away inside the Citizen this morning. Government forms task force to fight dengue fever. Government forms task force to fight dengue fever. That story is tucked away on page 4 of the Citizen. Dengue. Let's continue and see also what we have inside. Where is it? I'm trying to actually lift the East African for you quickly. If you've not grabbed a copy of East African, this is what is a splash this week. So make sure you grab a copy of East African. Inward-looking, East Africa moves to keep imports out, borrow and spend. But ministers also present expansionary budgets to be financed by heavy borrowing. Maybe just to zoom out for you to see how it is looking this week. This is how it is. Also, what awaits EAC in DR Congo's entry plan? Most East African community members are said to be enthusiastic the membership application. Follow the story also on page 3 of the East African this week. Editorial cartoons. What will we do without our daily tonic of cartoonists? Let's see what we have inside the Daily Nation today, according to Victor, what he has drawn for us. Also, the Standard as well, and the People Daily. And this is what is inside the Daily Nation today. It's all about the welfare of police. And this is in light of what really happened in Wajir, where we had 7 police officers being killed. Attempted cover-up for poor working conditions for police. Right, and this is how it looks, of course, with the new uniform as well. I'll leave it for you to decipher that, which has been drawn by Victor this morning. Let's see what Gado has for us inside the Standard. And this is what Gado has drawn inside the Standard today. It's all about the referendum talk. And the road to referendum looks like this. Right, every person is pointing every which way. Voters, they're just following blindly. But, of course, they're going to fall over the cliff there. And you can see, where are we going? Who cares? Our leader says it is the right path. well, even if it's leading to destruction. I'll leave it for you to decipher that. This is what has been captured by Gado inside the Standard. Let's see also what we have inside the People Daily today, according to Steno, and this is what he's drawn for us today. Right, Jubilee Inua Mama versus Jubilee Embrace. We have this particular slugfest that has been going on, and you can see them slugging out there. Tuko Pamoja. That is, of course, their slogan, but this is how it looks as well. So this is what is happening currently as far as the political tone and tenor in the country is concerned, especially within the Jubilee administration. That is what we have inside the People Daily today. So there you have it. But I want to hark you back also to history and show you how the Daily Nation looked way back in 1963. We've come a long way, and this is how it looked then. That is when Thursday, June the 20th, 17 million pounds, sterling pounds, aid from Britain, 26,000 sterling pounds to pay for repatriation. And it says here Britain is to provide Kenya with 17 million pounds worth of financial aid during the current financial year. This was announced in the House of Commons by the Commonwealth and Colonial Secretary, Mr. Duncan Sandys. That's how it looked then. You can see a side by story there. Regionalism will end. This is what Kanu was saying there. Also, Uhuru talks going well. Remember, that was 1963. And here it says that Uhuru talks in London between Kenya ministers and the British government were making progress. The Colonial Office said here today there will be further talks. That was happening on the month of June. And also we have here beggars must go. This is what the mayor was saying then. We had beggars in Nairobi also in 1963. He says Nairobi's mayor, that is Alderman Charles Rubier, yesterday called on citizens not to give alms to beggars. He says, quote unquote, we are pestered by beggars in Nairobi because there is a good living for them here, he declared. That was way back in 1963. I can just pick up another page for you, maybe page 2, to see what was there as well. Senate thanks the governor. The Speaker, Mwinga Chokwe, yesterday several times warned members of the Senate that they had to refrain from interrupting members when they were speaking. This was happening also in 1963, of course, the standing orders in Parliament. Also nationalized KBC, says Lubembe, the leader of government business. That was Clement Lubembe then told the Senate yesterday he felt the Senate should call on the House of Representatives to pass legislation nationalizing the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. This is where it began. And of course, that was way back in 1963. Mboya slums West. Kenya leader Tom Mboya says Westerners should not be critical of newly independent nations with only one political party because this system may be best for the country. That was way back in 19. Also, Moi, president of Rift Assembly, Kadu has made a clean sweep of all 4 specially elected seats in the Rift Valley Regional Assembly and has won both the presidency and the vice presidency. That was way back in 1963. That's how the Daily Nation looked then. And with the advance of technology, it has now morphed to what it is today. That is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. Right, back to the stories of course, the day. Revelations of how corrupt officials at the National Lands Commission colluded with a section of property owners to defraud taxpayers up to 3.3 billion shillings through overvaluation, while the NLC has halted payments of the implicated property owners after the EACC raised the red flag. Taxpayers have been losing up to 21 million shillings daily to the contractors for idle capacity. NTV's Seth Olale starts us off.
NTV is in possession of classified documents revealing how a total of 4 billion shillings could have been fraudulently lost through illegal SGR Phase 2 air compensation. It has emerged that a resolution made in an inter-ministerial meeting attended by, among others, Director of Public Prosecutions Nurdin Haji and Directorate of Criminal Investigations George Kinoti, held in the office of the Chairman of the Cabinet Committee of National Development, Implementation and Communication Fred Matiang'i on 5th February 2019, stopped the overvalued payment of 3.3 billion shillings to 93 property owners, also known as Project Affected Persons, PAPs. The 93 who were to receive the lump sum illegal compensation represent only 20% of the total beneficiaries. Interestingly, a staggering 367 property owners that fall within the SGR Phase 2A compensation corridor, who claim between 1 million shillings and 10 million shillings, form the bulk of complaints at 80% and are collectively being compensated 924 million shillings compared to the 3.3 billion shillings the 93 project-affected persons were to receive. So, who is culpable for the huge valuation anomalies at the National Lands Commission?
I am not condemning anyone. I think all of us have had distinct roles. As Secretariat, they performed their own role. Commissioners played their policy role, and I do not blame any one of them. Of course, matters of land is sensitive, and especially now where the payment is involved. But if there's anybody who is culpable, I think the law will take its course.
The multi-agency evaluation team that includes valuers from the Presidential Delivery Unit, National Lands Commission and Ministry of Land detailed how property belonging to 17 project-affected persons were illegally overvalued. For instance, the multi-agency evaluation team valued one such property to be worth 18,335,200 shillings. However, according to the National Lands Commission valuers, the property was controversially hiked to a staggering 244,117,294 shillings, with over 225 million shillings difference in valuation. That represents a variance of 1,231%.
If there's anybody who's claiming that the payment is delayed, we are not delaying. We are doing due diligence. We want to protect the public fund, cannot be lost.
For now, a combined total of 924 million shillings is being paid to 367 legitimately project-affected persons whose valuation is between 1 to 10 million shillings, with the NLC, Ministry of Lands and ESCC tasked with scrutinizing the remaining 3.3 billion shillings for purposes of accuracy and authenticity.
Now, erecting roadblocks will no longer be the discretion of officers in charge of police station or stations and the commanders going forward. The Office of Inspector General has issued new directives that solely vest that responsibility with the regional and formation commanders. For a roadblock to be mounted, the local stations must seek and get express permission from them. And as Ken Mijungu reports, this move is also supposed to address mischief that has seen the public exploited by the police.
The statement from the Office of the Inspector General of Police is the second in less than a month touching on road traffic management. It explains the rationale for this decision, key being smooth flow of traffic and management of scenes of accident. It reads in part, traffic checkpoints and roadblocks on highways shall only be mounted with the express authority of the regional or formation commanders and must be justified and rationalized. Further, it states that commanders will be held accountable for any misconduct by traffic officers which goes unpunished under their commands. It's signed by one Anthony Munga for the Director of Communication. Roadblocks have traditionally been used to discourage any form of criminal intention. They have also been used to check possible crime. Traffic police have used them to enforce through impromptu inspections and control of traffic. While this is the brighter side, they have been exploited by law enforcers to the detriment of road users. They have been used as toll stations where bribery is the order of the day. This is not limited to the highways but also feeder roads in major town centers and cities. On the highway, for example, a roadblock may be mounted by traffic officers and another roadblock set up a short distance away by administration police. In other areas, the county governments have also erected their own roadblocks. This is made worse in lawless societies where broke, unruly officers deliberately create their own roadblocks to collect money for a cause, usually during periods of need such as weeks preceding school openings. In some cases, stories are told of officers mounting roadblocks to collect money to fuel their official cars. But going forward, unauthorized roadblocks are prohibited and action will be taken against officers found to be going against this directive. The stretch from Mombasa to Malaba has already complied according to the police. It will, however, be difficult for the ordinary road user to know which is a legal roadblock or not. This exercise will entirely depend on the adherence and compliance of the police. Ken Mijungu, NTV.
Now, every minute last year, 25 people on the planet were forced to flee, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees' annual Global Trends report on displacement, equating to 2.3 million people in 2018, in a record high. The report shows West Africa saw an increase in refugees and displaced people of more than 13%, and all of Africa has more than 6 million refugees in total. A spike this year in attacks in the Sahel region has forced thousands to flee their homes in central Mali and northern Burkina Faso, including Isaka Swadogo, a 67-year-old Mose from the largest Burkina Faso ethnic group. Also, he is a wealthy trader with 3 wives and very large extended family made up of 217 people. The family fled from their village, that is Silgadji, north of Burkina Faso, and the site of a fast attack against Christians on April the 28th, in which assailants killed a priest and 5 other people. After hiding in the fields for weeks, Sawadogo and his family found themselves amongst some 2,000 people who have recently fled attacks in a resurgence of violence across the Sahel region. Once a pocket of calm in the Sahel, Burkina Faso has suffered a spillover Islamist violence from neighboring Mali, where 2 consecutive attacks in 3 villages over the last 2 weeks have killed more than 70 people. Hundreds of people have died in Islamist violence over recent months, and more than 150,000 have been forced to flee. Well, today is World Refugee Day, and developing countries, not rich Western nations, are bearing the brunt of the world's refugee crisis and are hosting most of the record 70.8 million displaced people who have fled war and persecution, the United Nations and Region Refugee Council said on Wednesday. Half of the world's forcibly displaced children, and the 2018 total is the highest in nearly 70 years, the UN Refugee Agency said in its annual flagship report, Global Trends, as I've mentioned earlier. But the global figure, which comprises 25.9 million refugees, 41.3 million people are uprooted within their homelands, with Ethiopia being the biggest recipients in the world. 3.5 million others are asylum seekers and considered conservative. On a visit to Ethiopia's biggest displaced people camp, Norwegian Refugee Council Secretary General Jan Egeland said Ethiopia has more than 1.5 million more displaced, added to more than 70 million refugees and internally displaced in the world now because of the war and conflict. Egeland added that in his life as an aid worker, he had not seen worse conditions like the one he saw in Ethiopia, and called on the developed world to step in and help.
Can you?
Of course, in light of the World Refugee Day, we have also the UN appointing Mercy Masika as the new, of course, refugee ambassador, that is UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador. This is a gospel musician. You can follow his story on page 2, or page 12, I should say, of the Daily Nation today. Congratulations are in order for Mercy Masika. Now, investigators have collected enough evidence to show that Russia provided the missile launcher used to shoot down Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 over eastern Ukraine in 2014. 3 Russians and Ukrainian will face murder charges for the deaths of 298 victims, the International Investigative Team said during a news conference. The suspects are likely to be tried in absentia in proceedings set to start in the Netherlands next March. Dutch authorities said Russia has not cooperated with the inquiry and is not expected to surrender defendants. The Russian foreign minister denied that it had not cooperated, while saying on Wednesday the investigation was intended to damage Moscow's reputation. The Dutch-led international team tasked with assigning criminal responsibility for the plane's destruction named the 4 suspects as Russians Sergei Dubinsky, Oleg Pulatov and Igor Girinkin, as well as Ukrainian Leonid Karachenko. It said international arrest warrants for the 4 had been issued.
We now have the information, have the proof that the Russian Federation is involved in this tragedy, in this crime. One day after 17th of July, they could have been in the position to tell us exactly what happened, because they know. I'm sure they know what happened because a book tailor from the 53rd Brigade has been used, and they know this. And they didn't give us this information, I wouldn't call this cooperation.
Now, evidence suggests Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and other senior Saudi officials are liable for the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, according to a UN rights investigator. There was no immediate reaction from Riyadh, which sent the 100-page report in advance, but the kingdom has regularly denied accusations that the prince was involved. Agnes Kalamad, the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial execution, called for countries to widen sanctions to include the Crown Prince and his personal assets unless he can prove he has no responsibility. Khashoggi, a critic of a prince and a Washington Post columnist, was last seen at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October the 2nd, where he was to receive papers ahead of his wedding. His body was dismembered and removed from the building, the Saudi prosecutor has said, and his remains have not been found.
Investigation should be to actually develop files on each of possible. What needs to be investigated is the extent to which the Crown Prince knew or should have known of what would have happened to Mr. Khashoggi, whether he directly or indirectly incited the killing, whether he acted without due diligence, whether he could have prevented the execution when the mission started and failed to do so. These are the range of issues which I believe a follow-up criminal investigation should focus on, along with the liability of other individuals. As far as the Secretary General is concerned, I am suggesting that he proceeds with appointing a panel of experts to undertake an international criminal inquiry into the killing, something I haven't done.
Now, an obese man in Pakistan, reportedly the heaviest in the country at over 330 kilograms, was moved via truck and a military helicopter to a hospital for treatment on Tuesday after he appealed for help on social media. Rescue teams broke down part of the wall of Nur Hassan's house to move him outside, as he was too big to pass through the main door of his house. He was later transported and lifted into a truck and subsequently the helicopter to a hospital in Lahore. Hassan was not able to move freely on his own because of his weight and also because of related medical complications. Army Chief General, or that is Komar Javed Bajwa, told Reuters that the army decided to make special arrangements for Hassan's transfer and treatment after his appeal on social media were not answered immediately. According to a surgery report released by the Pakistan Endocrine Society in 2018, 29% of Pakistani population is overweight, out of which 51% fall in the category of obesity. In 2017, Pakistan's most obese person with a weight of 360 kilograms underwent laparoscopic surgery, which brought his weight down to 200 kgs. Right, take care of what you're taking this morning. You don't want to be lifted by a forklift. Let's also move on to what also was a very, very interesting way back. That is the Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh is believed to have used to commit suicide in France in 1819, shooting himself in the chest after years of mental anguish, was auctioned off at $700,000 in US dollars in Paris on Wednesday. An anonymous phone bidder took home the Le Faucheur revolver, its casing heavily rusted and the inlay of the carved handle missing, for more than double the highest estimate put on it by experts at auction house. Among the potential buyers who came to watch the auction were fans of Van Gogh, also others who were just curious, but also museum managers such as Inges Winias. Van Gogh suffered bouts of psychosis and deep depression throughout his life.
85 000, en voulez-vous Grégoire à 85 000. 75 000, c'est le moment, 80 000. À 80 000 euros, 55 000, Théo, 60 000. 60 000, nous sommes 10 000. Rapidement à 110 000.
Let's buckle down to some sports finally, where Egypt and Zimbabwe took to the training pitch on Wednesday ahead of the African Cup of Nations opening match slated for Friday at the Cairo International Stadium. Hosts Egypt are seeking a record-extending 8th title, but their hopes rest on the form of Liverpool's Champions League winner Mohamed Salah. A switch to media hosting and an expansion to 24 teams. The European Union's second highest court has ruled that Adidas' three-stripe branding was invalid as a trademark, as it lacked a distinctive character. The General Court of the European Union said it upheld a decision of the European Intellectual Property Office in 2016 to annul a previous decision to accept the mark. The German sports goods company registered the trademark in 2014 for clothing, footwear and headgear, saying it consisted of three parallel equidistant stripes of equal width applied to the product in whichever direction. However, it was challenged by Belgian company Shoe Branding Europe, which Adidas has been in a decade-long dispute. An EU court rendered Shoe Branding's two-stripe trademark invalid last year, saying the stripes were too similar to the trademark of Adidas. Adidas needed to show the mark had acquired a distinctive character throughout the European Union based on its use so that consumers inherently knew a product was from Adidas and could distinguish it from products of another company. The court said the mark was not a pattern but an ordinary figurative mark, and it was not relevant to take into account specific uses involving colors. Adidas can still appeal to the European Court of Justice. Right, we want to buckle down to what we're discussing this morning. You're watching In the Market, and today we're all discussing mainstreaming business ethics. And we know corruption it epitomizes weakness in our ethical standards and integrity. To business, Corruption increases the cost of doing business, creates unfair playing ground, and curtails efforts towards efficiency, also improvement in innovations that could further promote profitability of a business. Now, in light of this, KEPSA and Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Center for International Private Enterprise will host a two-day conference in Nairobi from the 25th June to 26th June on improving ethics to increase profitability. And of course, also this is with the support of Milestone as well. And we want to just move to a guest this morning to tell us more about this particular conference and how we can try and mainstream ethics, that is business ethics, in the country. And in light of what we're going through as a country, trying to stanch the flow of corruption, how pivotal is this particular conference to the country? We've had other conferences before on corruption as well, but also this is pivotal, and we want to know what is this particular angle that they're going to bring when it comes to business ethics, and what is business ethics anyway? So allow me to introduce to you this morning Dr. Julius Kipngetich. I had done that at the top of the hour. He's the Group CEO of the Jubilee Insurance. Also, we have with us Fatma Mawi. She is the CEO of Milestone Resources. We have Patrick Obath, who's the chair of Adrian Kenya. The three of them, we're eagerly waiting for Ben Kirago from CPE Africa to join us, and also Rachel Mudoga also to join us this morning as well. They're running late, but of course we are going to wait for them. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. Good morning.
Patrick, good to see you.
Thank you.
And of course, I need to congratulate you as well as the new chair of a Standard Chartered Bank as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's just continue with this particular discussion. First of all, we may just begin. Why do we need to have this particular conference next week? And why do you think it's very pivotal for us to be talking about ethics, especially mainstreaming business ethics in Kenya? Let's begin with you, Patrick.
I think the essence of ethics in business is that really doing business ethically actually is a profitable thing to do. It's not about just being ethical for good, you know, as a philosophical issue. If you look at some of the businesses globally that have succeeded, you find that at the very top, the people who are sitting at the top are people who believe in ethical behavior in those companies. I was recently honored to have been with the CEO of DHL globally. Mm-hmm. And he basically said to a meeting of about 10,000 people and said, if my company wrongs you, tell them I told you that we're an ethical company. One person basically telling a meeting of 10,000 people from around the globe. Now that kind of leader who said basically empowers the employees of that company to be able to sort of hold him accountable in the event that anything he says to the customers and in public I think is a demonstration of why an organization like DHL, which has become a big global logistics company, has become what it is. And if you look at the ethos of that company, effectively, they believe in ethical behavior from top to bottom. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the essence of what you're trying to talk about in this conference, is that ethical behavior is required for Africa to grow as a continent. If we're going to grow with all the resources we have, with all the people that we have to have ethical behavior in business, and business needs to lead the countries where we are operating in to ensure that those countries also adopt ethical behavior. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in a country, especially, let's take Kenya for instance, where we believe that doing business in a straight way will not really take you to where you want to be in a short term. That you have to, cut corners, you have to use jiggery, pokery ways for you to actually, gain that particular wealth that you want, very quickly and in a short spell of time. Do you think, they normally say that honesty is a very lonely world, especially in this country. Being honest will not take you anywhere. No. You have to cut corners, you have to do something, you have to game the system, and we're all grappling with this. Do you think...
I'll give you the example of the company that I now chair, Adrian Kenya, which is a young upcoming company.
Adrian Kenya,
yes. And the reason I agreed to I was invited to the board by the owner of the company. The reason I agreed to sit there was when you looked at the company itself and listened to the way they have grown. They have grown with some of the larger companies, serving some of the larger companies in this country, purely by being an ethical organization and ensuring that any deal they do with anybody is fully transparent and open.
Yes.
And also as a company, we've walked away from deals whereby effectively people were demanding bribes or wanted to have some other deals, some side deals on that. And in fact, in one of the, one of the recent exposures in the newspaper, myself amongst all our directors was put in the newspaper saying that they're required by the DCI, saying that we were involved in this Kamoro Dam and whatever it is. The company was mentioned. And we decided, yes, let's just go and find out what these guys want. And when we went, we presented all our papers. There was a project that we had been assigned. We presented all our papers, and everything was right up in order, as was required. And in fact, it was putting up a communications mast somewhere so that they could actually begin to monitor the data around there before building. And the DCI people actually had gone there and photographed to show that there was nothing on the ground. But when they showed the photograph, the mast was actually physically present and working. So basically, that was the end of the engagement that we had with the DCI. And that is a case where if you do things ethically and above board,
you have no reason to worry.
You have no reason to worry. I mean, you are called to that kind of place. You go in, you present your evidence, and you're out. Right?
Dr. Ngichich, let's hear from you. Honesty is a lonely word in this country.
Yes.
You agree with me?
Okay. Let's begin probably by looking at the macro thing. If you look at, say, the challenges across Africa, all countries that have had serious challenges of corruption, unethical behavior of a higher scale,
yes,
always attract the wrong things. The first thing you normally attract is the criminals and the crooks of the world find residence in your country. If you look at, say, the Transparency International Index,
yes,
the countries that consistently appear in the top 10, if you look at them today, they are suffering from a terrorism crisis. In Kenya, we have Al-Shabaab. In Nigeria, we have Boko Haram. In Yemen, for example, they have Al-Qaeda. So all sorts of criminals find a nest in your country if you promote or encourage unethical behavior. Now, the consequences of all that is you will also then not attract investments, because then investors then tend to shy away from countries that are appearing high on the Transparency International Index. Even talent from around the world, but internally it depresses the population, because people live on hope.
Yes.
The minute that hope is curtailed, yes, or something, people don't feel that tomorrow is going to be better, then people enter into a depression. So it creates consequences that have long-term effects. So when companies and countries engage in unethical behavior, you're actually preparing a bad future for your citizens. And that really is the essence of next week's conference, is saying, we are bringing this upon ourselves as Africa. How can we reverse this? Because remember, Africa technically is the richest continent. If you look at even opportunities like agriculture, Africa has 60% of the remaining arable land in the world. We can feed ourselves and feed the world. But what is curtailing those opportunities is unethical behavior. If we all of us follow ethical behavior and follow the rules of the game, we can make this continent great. And that is really the essence. We must, and we are not, if you tell companies, oh, you can do these things, okay, you can get an advantage in the short term. But that advantage will eventually kill you in the long term, because what wins in the long term is that ethical behavior. If you create an ethical company where employees deliver, these things will benefit your company in the long term. And that is what we are emphasizing as Jubilee Insurance through our initiative called the Blue Company Project.
Right. Yes. Right, but before we take a short break, let's hear also from Fatima Amawi as well, from Milestone Resources. When he's talking about ethical, sometimes it can be very abstract and broad, but we need also maybe to mainstream it on where we really want to focus the ethics, from where it's beginning, where it's headed as well. We have regulations, legislative approvals in this country as well, but the implementing of his, acts and pieces of legislations is diametrically different as well. Let's just hear from you.
Okay, thank you. Number one, let me just underscore what the gentleman has said. One of the things that the conference wants to do is actually to demystify this idea that you have to be unethical for you to succeed. I work a lot in the SME space, and I work with small organizations that are trying to scale up their businesses. And one of the things I will tell you is that I will not succeed because I have not given. Now, that kind of mentality is actually defeating because it inhibits and it restricts innovation, it restricts production, it restricts the doing business in a good way. What do I mean by that? In terms of what do you produce? People may not want to give quality simply because they feel nobody cares about quality. What people care about is how much I would give. So this conference wants to demystify that because a number of organizations, as we can see here, have succeeded and they have done the right thing. So this is what we want to do. When it comes to ethical behavior, number one, we cannot evade the fact that private sector is actually the supply side because people will ask, but people don't force. What do you do? Do you give in, or do you look for other ways whereby you would still get that business without necessarily giving in? Because the more you give, the more they want, and it is a cycle that reached, it goes into unproportional levels, and right now it is no longer akitu kidogo, it's about akitu kikubwa, which again shoots us in the foot, just like what Daktari has said. Ethical behavior is about doing the right thing. Okay? And it's not about pointing fingers and saying, you did not do A, B, C, D, E. It is about, what am I doing? I have a choice here. I can take the shortcut, or I can go the long way and I can get it done. So it is about paying your taxes when you have to. It is about, do I look for a shortcut or do I give quality instead? Because if I do a shortcut, yes, I'll get the deal. Yes, my business will grow, but what happens, and this goes to what Engineer Bath just said, when I go away, when I die, because everybody has to go away at some point, what happens to the company that I left? Can the company survive? Did it have processes? Did it have procedures that will enable it to grow? Or because the head was squarely wheeler-dealer and was getting business through shortcut ways, that is when organizations don't grow. And we have seen a number of organizations in Kenya that actually collapse. And what we are saying, this is a business issue. It is not just about morals. In addition to morals, it is about the sustainability, future sustainability of your company. And these are the issues that we would like to showcase during the conference.
Fantastic. A good point to take a short break. And just to remind you, yes, we are talking about mainstreaming ethics, business ethics, especially here in the country where we're grappling with corruption. But how can we shake into place ethics, right? A lot has happened before. We have legislations. We have also codes like Mongozo codes. We have the corporate governance codes that is being also trying to be implemented by the Capital Markets Authority as well, where inside there, a lot of details is given on how the boards also should handle themselves when it comes to issues of ethics. The world is talking about the people, planet, and profit as well. And all that is in an effort to try and mainstream ethics as well. So we want to hear from you as well. Hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is our Twitter handle, AM Live NTV, our profile name on Facebook, and 20686, our SMS portal. When we circle back, we continue with more with our panelists on business ethics, and we'll try and see where did it begin. Of course, we know big companies like Aaron and WorldCom, some of the giants that have fallen along the way, they brought these particular discussions about, ethics and about codes as well, and corporate governance codes as well. So we shall be keenly looking at that as well with our panelists on the other side of the break. Don't go away. market here on Live. And this morning we're turning our focus on mainstreaming business ethics. There will be a big conference next week. That is the Africa Business Ethics Conference that will be happening from the 26th to 27th. And we have our panelists here who are going to also talk to us about this particular conference, or we are actually discussing that this morning. And we are focusing on the issues to do with the corporate governance and business ethics, especially in Africa, where we are dogged with so much issues to do with corruption and people cannot do business in a straight manner when, of course, you want to achieve in life in the shortest spell of time. You have to use jiggery-pokery ways and dubious ways to actually gain that. But is that the way to go? And what is of institutions here in the country doing to make sure that people are following the proper channels? They don't really game the systems as it were that are in place right now. Do we follow also our professional ethics? Because I know every brand or profession has its own ethics as well that people should follow. And I'm holding court this morning with Dr. Julius Ngetich, who is a Group CEO of Jubilee Insurance, also is the chair of the Going Blue project. Also we have with us as well Fatma Mawi, I should say. She is the CEO of Milestone Resources and also the chairman of Adrian Company. This is Engineer Patrick Obath. We continue with the conversation. Remember, you can hit us on Twitter. AM Live is our Twitter handle, AM Live NTV. And AM Live NTV is our profile name on Facebook, and 20686, our SMS portal. So before we took a short break, we wanted just to hark back into history and see where all these particular talks of corporate governance and business ethics began, gaining traction in early 2000. We know the history of Aaron and WorldCom and other companies as well. Madoff lately that has, sponged off a lot of investors off of their life retirement benefits, the investment as well. He's in the slumbers right now. But people did not see this happening because they put up a veneer along the way. But when we talk about this, we know the legislation that happened, I think, in the U.S. Congress with the Sabali-Oxley that brought forth the corporate governance. Can we begin from our country? Because a lot of companies, and of course, will not be ashamed to really mention this along the way, have also really gone down the tube because of issues to do with ethics, issues to do with corporate governance, where also maybe board members are colluding or some officials are colluding. We have Fatima talking about also the private sector being the supply side is also, in the thick, is having the skin in the game as well as far as perpetrating corruption is concerned. We are always navel-gazing on the government, but it takes two to tango, and that also comes from the private sector. Patrick Obath, looking at the history of his country, we've been fighting this corruption menace for the longest time ever. People are now sort of inured and become insensitive to the talks of corruption. Now, when we list millions, it's not eye-bagging as it was, right? Yeah. But eyes will bug out when we talk about billions. And even right now, we're getting used to it. We're heading to trillions right now. Yes. Patrick.
I think you're right. The country has been focusing on basically the receiver, which is primarily at the moment the receiver of key services, which is the government.
Yes,
yeah?
yes.
So we receive services from them and we need to do this. So you talk about everything along the supply chain, from the customs to the revenue authority, the whole of the revenue authority. When you talk about getting your a license,
yes,
or not paying for service, or not paying tax, and not paying license for license fees and whatever it is and so forth, you pay a small amount and you get whatever it is that you require. We sort of started off with the mundane things, and it became because it became the norm. We went for bigger and bigger and bigger things. And I think to the extent that, as you say quite rightly, it became the way of life in a lot of instances, that you go in, somebody has established a little, photocopying kiosk around the corner, and I need a form. The guy has it, but it says, go and photocopy, and that's the business. Starting from the mundane at that kind of level, all the way up to corporations who actually pay agencies like clearing agents and say, fine, within that include, whatever you do, include the fees in there. I don't want to know. So I, as a corporate, I am already abetting corruption by allowing my agents to inflate their cost to me, whilst when I sit as an organization, I say I'm clean because I'm not bribing anything. But all the people who work for me, it is hidden in their fees, and that is the way they've been doing business. So it sort of crept in to become the norm, because now in my organization, say, I just know, we pay these guys and everything's done. But you don't go to them and say, we're an ethical corporation, why don't you also do the same thing? So that is why it grew, because some of the ethical companies, so to speak, started removing that from them and transferring it to somebody else. So they say, within my house, I'm okay. The more enlightened companies decided that they were going to move down the line and actually get their all their suppliers to do exactly the same thing.
Yes, yes.
So those companies have actually got an environment or you know, a web of stakeholders who are actually ethical operators, and they went down in business and they're coming up again. What has happened since then, I think, in the private sector to bring us to today, is that in the last 3 to 4 years, we've actually realized that we, as a private sector, are the people who need to change. It's not the government. It's us at the supply side. So if you remember, early this year, we had the multi-sectoral conference on corruption. I think we covered it here. That was a sort of a big say that as a business community, as a private sector, we want to stop this thing proactively from within the business community. 3 years ago, the anti-corruption bill was passed, and that was again was authored by the private sector and then taken to Parliament, so that at least the private sector itself has got some kind of instrument that can that can be used to control corruption within the private sector. Unfortunately, that has not yet fully caught on, because the regulations have still to be done, and that is now something that we left to the implementing agency, the Anti-Corruption Commission and the government to actually do that. I think it's reaching a point where we want to take it back and do it ourselves and then send it out, because we felt that if we do everything, people might look at that bill and say, this is these guys protecting their own back. So we've started taking measures to actually put legislation in place, but legislation alone is not good enough. And I think that's why this issue of ethics becomes even more important in the area of corruption. You need to have individuals, every person who is involved in a company, an organization, to behave ethically for that to happen. You've seen all these big stories of corruption globally, different companies and so forth. The companies had processes in place, had everything. But it took 1 or 2 bad apples within the company to start colluding to do things, and then things, the companies went belly up, because these guys, start off with the very first item that was with the Bearings Bank in Singapore, right? Where things, one rogue trader brought down a company that had been in existence for years, for hundreds of years, right? And you look at every single major corruption issue that has happened, all the way up to the recent items that you're seeing, there's always a company that was believed to be good because the process is on top. Well, okay, but below that you had unethical behavior by individuals. So it's not just companies that are going to behave ethically, they've got to inculcate the ethical behavior amongst every single person in that organization. And when that happens, it means that when I see an opportunity to do something wrong, I bring that out as something that, as an ethical company, we need to tighten our procedures to stop that from happening. And then you share with others. And the minute you start doing that and being proactive, because your culture is an ethical culture, you will find that all these things that drain you as a company are removed. And that's why I said at the beginning, ethical business is actually profitable business, because internally you are very, very efficient, you cut out waste, you do all sorts of good things as a company. I think that's why ourselves, as Adrian, where I sit in today, and Kepsa, where I'm a member of the Anti-Corruption Steering Committee, we are committed to actually ensuring that we have ethical behavior within the companies that will subscribe to what we're doing.
But maybe keeping it, you can come to you and also tell us, when you talk about ethics and putting systems and procedures in place, essentially ethics is an innate thing, right? It is up to the person at the end of the day, even if there are systems. And we know this when you read about Enron and Jeffrey Skillings and Kenneth Lay, people who are, well versed with what they're doing, but they had the systems, they had the procedures in place. But they are the people who are overseeing these systems and procedures, yet they were gaming the system at the end of the day. Let's talk about it. Okay. Can you really educate ethics? I don't know. Can you really, is it something that it is actually inculcated right away from home? So if I'm a full-grown man like I am right now, it will be extremely difficult to teach me ethical behavior. Unless maybe there's some forces from above that actually will change my persona, right? A spiritual intervention.
Okay, thank you very much. I think as a follow-up of what Patrick said, you see, ethics is not a legal issue.
It's not a legal issue.
Yes, we are no longer talking about lack of laws. If you look at the Constitution of Kenya, Chapter 6, leadership and integrity, it's well articulated there. We have the Leadership and Integrity Act, which then created the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. It is already there. Every profession has a code of conduct,
Yes,
lawyers. So it's not a legal issue. It's a moral issue. Okay? It is appealing to the conscience of an individual. They say the best ethics is when you do something right when nobody's looking. So we are asking companies and employees within those companies, can you do the right thing, the moral thing? It's no longer about a legal question. We cannot enact any more laws in Kenya. Okay?
We have a chock full of this right now as it is, yes.
We just have to talk about behavior. And this behavior is guided by various actors. This conference is bringing in government, is bringing in civil society, is bringing in private sector, all together to say, let's forget about the law for a while. Let us look at the moral question. Are we doing the right thing as individuals within a company? And the whole essence of us as Jubilee Insurance bringing in the Blue Company Initiative is to say, let us address that behavior question. And we say, a company makes a commitment. This commitment of saying, we will run by the ethics, the rules of our profession. We will run by the rules of our organization. We will run by the rules of our industry. If we do that, then we as a company will start doing the right thing. And if we do the right thing, we are already building the foundation not only for our company and our people, but also for our country. So it's all together, put together, and say, so right now we have close to 300 companies that have signed up. We want to sign up before the end of the year, 1,000 of them.
With the Going Blue initiative.
Yes. And the rules of commitment are pretty simple. What we require is that each employee in a company will not be allowed to take any bribes, and you will put it in your company policy, and you sign off, okay? 2, your auditors will also sign off and say, when we audit, one of the key risk areas we'll be looking for is if there is unethical behavior in this company, okay? If your auditor says this company does things correctly as per the law, as per the rules of the company, as per the rules of your profession, then they sign off. And then, of course, then all these things must go to the board of that company and they make a declaration. Because we are appealing to the heart, and we are appealing to somebody's conscience. And once, for example, we prick this conscience, we start a behavior movement. So therefore, the Blue Company Initiative is actually a platform. We are creating a platform for companies to say, guys, if we go the route we are going, we are damaging not only our own company, but the environment in which that company operates in, which is our country. And if we damage our country, which other one do we have? So we are appealing to corporations around the country, please join the Blue Company Initiative, which then becomes an advocacy platform for us to talk about ethical behavior and save our country. Because the way we are going, the challenges that we have as a country cannot be solved with the level of unethical behavior that we have in the country. I mean, if you look at across our society, whether you are talking, we profess Christianity, but look at the level of unethical behavior that exists in our society. And as Patrick said, it has to be addressed from both the supply side and the demand side. And we also have to accept that the so-called supply side also has its own issues, because there is also bribery across private sector, which we must address and say, this cannot go on. And so therefore, the interaction between government private sector, civil society, must be addressed and say, let us create a moral foundation. It could be through the education system by saying, okay, you know, what does it mean to be a patriotic citizen of the country?
Thank you.
It was all, if you look at the struggle for the new constitution, it was all about creating an ethical society. But we have lost the way, and we need to recreate and say, what is the correct way for our country to make sure that we do things correctly, and also so that you live your life, that single life God has given you, with a clear conscience.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's really the point.
So what we can say is actually like a brother's keeper, the accountability project, the blue company initiative. So you have to be listed there. Then what sort of metrics, systems and procedures have you come up with, you know, that you can say if we're trying to audit if a company has actually been embroiled in corruption or has actually, you know, held itself, you know, above reproach, then these are the, you know, some of the itemized, you know, things that we need to check off the list as well, that now they've actually, you know, passed through the Rubicon, or maybe so to speak, they've passed muster for them to be accredited to be an ethical company. Briefly, very briefly.
The key point is to create peer pressure, okay? Because as I said, it's not a legal issue any longer. We have too many laws. What we are trying to create a platform where companies who have signed up put pressure on themselves. If you look at the way we are recruiting them as associations. KEPSA is already there, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and then now we sit together and we say, what can we do within, say, Kenya Association of Manufacturers to make sure that we put bear and pressure on companies that are not obeying their own rules. Remember, these are their own rules.
Their own rules.
Yes. So companies and associations have very clear rules on ethical behavior. It's just that about enforcement.
Thank you.
And the Blue Company initiative is creating a platform to create peer pressure for institutions to obey their own rules.
Thank you. Yes. Let's hear from Fatima.
Before you go, allow me to add into that. It's interesting because we are more or less in the same space. What Milestones does is actually now to help organization to transition to a clean enterprise. How do we do that? You see, a company is an ongoing concern. So it is a sort of like a private entity. On the other hand, the directors as well as the management team also have their own life. Meaning that a company can be sued for what the management and the directors have done. What we do is, number one, and I'd like to add on to what Dr. has said, it is about the behaviors of the leaders within that organization. But how does a company exonerate itself from the behaviors of its CEO or from the behavior of its directors? It is able to do that by saying, okay, Milestones, we train on business ethics, we train organizations. We would take a company, train it on business ethics, on what it needs to do, on what it needs to follow its own rules. We also do what we call a risk mapping, because in life, you have 10% of population who will not engage in corruption no matter what happens. This is a research. Then you have another 10% who will look for loopholes to do shoddy deals. Okay? In the middle, you have 80%. So what we are saying is, it is these 80% that we need to talk to so that the 80% can move to the uncorruptible rather than to the corruptible ones. And how do you do that? We train. We do risk mapping. We look at your systems and processes, because this 10% will always look for loopholes in your company in order to gain. So we close those loopholes, okay? And then once you've closed the loopholes, you make it difficult and expensive for people to engage. Once you have done that, once you have trained people, once you have closed the loopholes, once we have looked at your risk matrix, okay, then if something still happens, because remember, we are human beings. An organization now can stand and say, I did everything. So in case there's a fine, in case there's imprisonment, in case of anything that the law brings out because of that particular behavior, it now no longer goes to the company, it goes to the individual. This is what Milestones does. This is what we train organizations, and we have seen the new trade policy, the new US trade policy, they actually want to do business with us. The one thing they're looking for is how ethical is your organization. So we are telling companies this is not just about moral issue, it is also a business issue. You want to scale up your business, you want to grow, but you need to be ethical, because if you don't, organizations will first look at how ethical are you. And not only that, if you have done something, you will be penalized. For example, the UK Bribery Act, the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, it goes beyond geographical jurisdiction, meaning that if a US company that has a local distributor here in Kenya, and it is the distributor that has found to be corrupt, the US company gets fined. So US companies now, UK company, French companies are very, very clear and careful about who their local distributors are. For example, Safaricom is concerned, even the Mama Mboga that may be supplying its distributor, because if they were found to be corrupt, it will actually go back to Safaricom. So it is a moral issue, yes, it's a behavioral issue, yes, but above all, it's about business. So we train organizations to sort of like safeguard your company, and then if you want to grow, the new issue is about ethics. Do you want to grow? If you want to grow, you better put your books in order. You better have the right people in order. Because remember, human beings, the 80% can fall on either side. So this is what we are calling, we train them and we help you to make that transition into an ethical enterprise.
Right. So I want also to pick our thoughts on what also corporate world is developing into, or maybe navel-gazing into, and that is the people, the planet, and the profits, the PPP. And the question is, as we're discussing, and I've heard you also, Fatima, saying about the people, that I, as a company, will love also to get my supply chain all the way from the source to the retail or the distributors, following ethical behaviors. That, yes, first of all, even where I'm purchasing my goods, or maybe where I'm purchasing my raw materials, people are not involved in child labor. That can be an ethical issue in the first place. That if a company also is providing materials, and we have that maybe from an extractive source, from these regions where we have violence as well, and we know many of them, like Congo right now, where people, extracting a lot of minerals as well for the, for the manufacturing of mobile phones as well. But are they also involved in child labor? The way that we've extracted there, how are the people also handled? The human resource aspect, right? Is there any blood diamond, so to speak? And how will that adversely affect company? But when we come to Kenya here, there was an issue of, and I like the Going Blue, the Going Blue project. There was also the green buying sort of project that was, or the green buying policy that needs to be inculcated for every company, going green. It's not just about the environment, but it's just about also, looking at holistically the issues to do with ethics as well. Maybe Patrick, you can tell us. We have so many legislations. We have so many code of ethics from professionals. We have so many pieces of a code, so to speak, Mwongozo Code, as I mentioned, also the Capital Markets Authority Governance Code as well. Not Capital Markets Authority Governance Code as well, but every organization, every pieces of codes seems to just be operating in a silo. You have yours now, you have the Blue Project, but that is another silo now that has come up with, their listed ways of following the ethical behavior. So we have the private sector as well, their own silo, the government, their own silo. How do we try and put these organizations, all these silos actually, to interface and operate seamlessly to achieve the common goal that we're trying to achieve?
I think what you'll find, if you look at all the initiatives that are happening in this country, you'll find the same companies sitting in those places, exactly the same. What they're doing, they're creating different universes within which they operate, right? So if I operate within one particular initiative, I have a certain set of interactions that I have. If I operate in another initiative, I have another set of interactions. And this way, you're basically creating an interlocking network of companies that eventually all will come up to achieve. One of the biggest things that we tend to try and do is to have this one big body that is the authority on everything. Take me to any country in the world where you have one body that is the authority of everything. It is not there. So I think the fact that we have a lot of initiatives that are happening is good. It means that there is a recognition across a range of players that it is necessary to do something. Now, the way it is done may appeal to one group of people in a particular way and another group of people in a particular way. We had the Global Compact, which was started off about 6 or 7 years ago as a movement, right? And that had 10 particular activities, and including ethical behavior was in there as well, right? That is ongoing. It is led by CAM on behalf of the private sector, and that is continuing. We recently launched the multi-sectoral initiative. That again is another one, looking at it from a different angle, right? So all of them have taken a way of working that may appeal to a particular universe of people, and they can work. All of us who are involved are all thinking the same thing. Our objective is basically to get rid of corruption and get ethical behavior, ethical practice and business as the way to go, right? So I don't think there's any conflict in terms of all these organizations working. You talked about rules and regulations and everything else at the beginning. And I think, again, we recognize that all those things are there. My belief, and that's what we want to inculcate in our company, is that you do not need those rules if you have the right people. They will just operate the right way, and the rules will just automatically be their way of life, right? What is happening in terms of then writing up codes and everything else is where people don't have a compass, right? So those provide a compass towards reaching that mode of behavior that effectively you have no, you don't need those codes. Right? So I think, yes, we are starting from a very low base, as it were, which will need to guide a large number of people on what is right and wrong. And the first thing you always do is, first of all, you put laws, which basically says these are the boundaries within which you cannot behave, you cannot operate. But then the policing of those boundaries requires people who already ascribe and aspire to the same values as those rules are put in. If you have the people who are sort of looking at those boundaries and not behaving ethically, then those boundaries mean nothing. So again, you look at some of the agencies that were established to basically to run those rules. There were certain times when there were questions about those agencies themselves, right? Are they able to deliver on the mandate they have been given? Are they funded properly? Are they whatever? All these things. And there you find the forces against ethical behavior and ethical business beginning to hit back. For example, when Parliament withholds or reduces the budget of the Anti-Corruption Commission, right? That there is somebody in there who has an interest in stopping them from delivering on their mandate. Yeah? So that is the person who we need to target and tell them, listen, my friend, you are hurting us as a country and as businesses because you're stopping this from happening. And if you stop it from happening, the total cost to the country, including you who is doing it, is going to go up. So those are the conversations that are happening in these various fora that you're hearing, is how can we begin to put that pressure onto organizations and individuals, as Julius was saying. Peer pressure. That is the only thing that will work, because we don't have any legislative or any prosecutorial opportunities. Our main weapon is peer pressure. And we will continue to do the peer pressure activities within all these fora that you see, including this conference. I mean, this conference is basically going to set a whole bunch of people together and say, guys, who wants to put their hand up that we are, we're an ethical business? And the question will be asked, and see how many people will put their hand up. You'll probably be 100%, because the only people who are coming there are people who are already doing it. But we also hope that people who come to that conference will be people who want to learn and want to understand why ethical business makes sense, right? And there is no silver bullet that is going to actually get ethical behavior. Look at the countries that are sort of touted as being, you know, at the forefront and the sort of at the top end of the corruption perception index. If you go to those countries, you'll find exactly the same issues. But they've actually had a very, very long period of time when they've actually grown all the matrices that people are now inherently behaving well. And I'll give you an example, and I'll use the road. And I was traveling recently. I was in France, I was in Germany, and I was recently in Sweden, and I was in the US sometime early this year. A driver driving along the road will drive up, and when they see a pedestrian approaching a crossing, they will stop. They will stop because that is the expectation, that's the rule. They will stop and let you cross. Even if there is nothing, no policeman, nothing around, the driver will stop and let you cross. That is where, but in Kenya, you have the rules, but you'll have a hooter, you'll have whatever it is, guys. When one guy stops, the other guys will overtake and try and whatever. So, and how much time did it take that guy to simply stop, let one guy cross, and then he moved on? That is a kind of mindset that we need to have in this country, whereby you have been given a set of guidelines and you just go ahead and do it. And if we can begin to behave that way as a country, then all the inefficiencies we see, all the bribery that is happening and so forth will disappear. So peer pressure on getting companies to start behaving well and getting their employees to think exactly the same way, and hopefully those employees will move that behavior to their own constituency, to their families, to their homes, to their friends who they meet in the bar. If that discussion takes place on a constant basis, I think the changes will begin to happen. So as you said quite rightly, there's so many initiatives happening.
Yes.
Each of them will reach a certain constituency. Hopefully those people will interact, yeah, who have been touched by each of those initiatives. And then you'll have those conversations happening in a lot of places.
Yes. So,
and so long as that happens, when that starts to happen, then the movement, the change in terms of the ethical compass of this country will begin to move. Yeah.
So yeah, the point of conference is where actually we are seeking. Where is the integration? And hopefully we'll clearly see it at some point in this country. But let's get granular a bit and the practicality of it, because you say the peer pressure, that this is what you want to bring, peer pressure to bear. If you have this particular code of ethics as a company, you're actually keeping to it, you're following it to the T. But on the flip side, where we have peer pressure, and we've had companies in this country, and maybe you're subjected also to actually pick up this company and try to get it from the morass that is in. And I can pick a case in point, like you have been also, the CEO of Uchumi as well. When Uchumi was in tatters, and reports that are out there is like, yes, even some board members have been involved in an unethical behavior as well. We have someone also who is maybe supplying to the family, right? And is using the approval of the board, so to speak. And you feel like you are a leader there, but there's a pressure bearing on you as a CEO. Where does now the moral issue and ethical behavior really come in, and where you can actually now stamp your foot and say, no, this cannot really happen? Before now, this really goes down the tube, because you can see it. Right? So when you're in such a horn of a dilemma, then how do you put all this ethical behavior that we're talking about to practice? Dr. Nitich.
Okay, I agree with you. It boils down to the leader.
The leader himself.
Yes, and how leaders as young people are socialized through the system. If you look at, say, the character formation of our children at primary and secondary school, what kind of skills are we imparting on them? Okay, what kind of moral behavior are we sort of showcasing to them as a society? Because that is the critical moment. Even by the time they come to universities, what kind of behaviors are we demonstrating to them? So it's a whole societal question on how society itself is structured and how society values itself, okay? And we must go back to the drawing board. We had hoped that the coming of the new constitution will trigger a lot of these things. Unfortunately, in my view, the church and civil society dropped the ball. Okay, the church now welcomes money into itself without questioning, and that is where you drop the ball on character, because then young people are saying, "Oh, if my pastor can accept rushwa, who am I?" Okay, or even the civil society pressure. You know, most of them joined government, and so they got lost, you know, in that moral voice, and then disappeared.
Yes.
I remember during the inauguration of Mike Kibaki on December 30th, 2002, there's a statement he made which he said, corruption will cease to be a way of life in Kenya. And it resonated with a lot of people. Then you saw Kenyans exercise civil arrests, you know, where they found a policeman and they arrested them. That was the spirit. But why did we lose it? Because we couldn't sustain the momentum. So initiatives that like what we are creating now, like the Blue Company, is trying to put pressure on the society, beginning with our members, and saying, if we create a nucleus of ethical companies, it will snowball eventually the rest of society. And it has to begin somewhere. I think Patrick Opath said it has to begin somewhere. And there could be several initiatives. We are not so sure what will work, but definitely, do people believe that ethical behavior leads to a good country? The answer is yes. People believe so. But people then think, I can take a short-term shortcut, but eventually I will end up being ethical. But we are saying that also damages you as a company. So if you look at even, say, listed companies like Jubilee or Uchumi, as you said, they are subjected to CMA rules on integrated reporting, which then appeals to what you are saying, people, planet, and profit.
Yes.
Okay? So integrated reporting is about sustainability. Are you doing things that harm the planet? Are you doing things that harm people? Okay? Are you giving good return to your shareholders at the expense of the other two? So those are things that our companies are now going through, and they have started now from 2016 reporting under the new framework on integrated reporting. So that is already happening. If you look at even companies are then also looking at SDGs, it's no longer just government looking at them, companies are also looking at them and saying, what can we do? In my view, there's one, the SDGs are 17, there is one that probably needs to be crafted and added. I normally call this SDG 18, and I would like to discuss it in the conference, which is about clever and clean governments and institutions. That is what we forgot. The glue that ties all these SDGs is that people in governments and institutions, whether in private sector or government, must be clever, which is best intention, and then also must be clean, which is ethical. If you do that, then you will see society progressing much faster. We will be a society, a world that cares about its people. We care about the sustainability of the planet, and then we also care about the owners of the capital, which is profit. If you do all of them, we are then giving an optimal view of how society should develop. Because sometimes, if you look at, if you pursue profit at the expense of the planet, the company is not sustainable. If you pursue profit at the expense of doing things ethically to people, like you said, children, then we are damaging the planet. So all these things have to be, we must pay attention to them. So my belief is that we are at a tipping point of a moral renaissance in Kenya. We must relook at who we are as a country, what kind of people are we creating for our country, what kind of institutions we are building for our country, what kind of leaders that then must emerge from our society. Are they a good example to the younger generation on what needs to be done for our country? So we need to retrace our steps and say, where did we go wrong, and correct them. And so that's why we are creating platforms like the Blue Company, so that then we start retracing our steps to do the right thing for our country, because it is those lack of doing the right things that are creating the current problems of unemployment, inequality in our society, and the general moral decay.
Right. And I like it the way also Julius has actually diplomatically prevaricated on the issue of, you know, that Uchumi issue, where you actually put on a corner and the pressure is on you. And you have all these ethics. How do you react?
You see, if you look at the case of Uchumi, what caused its problems? It was false reporting.
It was false reporting?
Yeah. So which is an ethical issue.
Fantastic, because
yeah.
I want to also to just maybe get granular with that issue,
yeah.
where we have the issue of false reporting,
yeah.
and this is happening also with the auditors,
yeah.
right? We are talking about integrated reporting, and this is gaining traction since 2016. We have the implementation from the Capital Market Authority, Corporate Governance Code, that integrated reporting is very key. We can see a lot of them doing them right now. Disclosure of even the CEO's salaries are splashed also on the dailies, some of them as well. But where we have the board colluding with an audit firm on the issue of maybe corporate governance audits, and also on the issues of the, you know, the financial, the profitability of the how then do we inculcate? Because these are things we're grappling with. We are talking about ethics, but still, we have all this system and measures and matrices that Patrick was talking about, but you sit as a board and you say, no. For us to look good, let's be good on the paper. But we know the malaise that the company is in, and we're lying to the public.
Yes.
I mean, that is a moral dilemma that, you know, most companies in Kenya are suffering from. Fatima, you can weigh in as a Ngetichi, just pick up also his thoughts on that.
Allow me. You see, what you say is exactly the reality. And as I said earlier, you need to take the organization away from the people so that the people now take responsibility. It is no longer Uchumi. It is so-and-so did this, so the onus rests with that particular individual, not the organization. But how can the organization now be able to say, I did all that was possible, and I am not, as Uchumi or as whichever company, I am not the issue here. The problem is Mr. So-and-so and Mr. So and Mr. So-and-so, because you went through. Meaning that you trained your people, you did your matrices, you put in the systems, you made sure that everybody understood and everybody signed up to those codes of conduct and codes of ethics. And if they still go against that, it is not the company that should be taken to task, it is the individuals that should be taken to task. And this is also what is happening with the Bribery Act of 2016. It now takes us to individual level. But organizations need to understand that, yes, you are ethical, you've signed up, yes, you have trained, yes, you have done your clean matrix, you've done your heat matrix, and then you have put in the systems. Now, if individuals go against those systems, then kila mtu abebe msalaba wake. Then here you carry your own cross as an individual, not the company. And this is what we are saying.
Which is sometimes very difficult, Patrick Obath, because we've seen if you are the face of you know, your company, you're sort of a brand. We've seen when you resign, also the stocks shares actually, they take a dip for a while before it actually recoups. But how do you uncouple the face, as you say, the individual from the company this? And what are the measures that we can say it is Patrick? Because we've seen all these people who are gaming the system through the board. Once they go, the company crumbles. And we give a very good example of Aaron with Jeffrey Skillings and Kenneth Lay as well. And now when Jeffrey left, you know, where is Enron today?
It's all around leadership. When a company becomes a person, you basically have a key man risk. That person becomes the company becomes that person. When they leave, irrespective of what it is, whether it is ethical issues, whatever, that company just goes. And in a way, I mean, we are to blame ourselves in the business industry of all these gurus, so to speak, who are, you know, everybody swears by what they do. But those people are actually operating within a particular environment at a particular time where the external environment and the internal environment actually sort of work together to make what they say work. If you take the same principles to a different situation, they may not work. So you've got to be continually changing. The organization needs to have its DNA being ethical behavior. The organization, not Patrick Obath being the CEO or the chairman of a board, no. It's got to be the whole organization. And when you talk about the board level, I'm sure Julius will echo on this one, if you don't do it from the board down, then the company will be rotten for certain. And when you start finding people doing all sorts of jiggery-pokery down there, it's because from the top, the compass is not exactly true north. It's probably about northeast or northwest, whatever it is. And therefore, that distance between north and northeast, jiggery-pokery is happening in there, right? So until right from the top, you say we are going to operate ethically, then it never happens. Your auditors you're talking about are not going to find it. They're not skilled enough to know how my company operates in detail. All they can work on is what I give them, right? They can ask a few questions in there, but until they actually come and work within my own company and understand our details, they can never unravel what is happening in my company. But if they come and do that one, they're conflicted. So I think we've got to respect the boundary between the external factors coming to look at what we do and how we operate ourselves. The key element that has to meet at that boundary is the fact that they will trust, and that is why you see these days a lot of disclaimers coming in on the company accounts, right? Because that trust is not necessarily there. But if they know and trust, and this company is actually put up there as a company where everybody is ethical, and you become almost like an open book as a company. Yes. You can come and look at my accounts, you can come and do this, you can come. I don't hide anything. When people begin to trust you as a company because they see you've got a moral compass, you're ethical, then the issue of coming to audit, to coming to do whatever it is becomes much easier, right? And in fact, you might not even need auditors at the end of the day because you're doing everything right. Yeah. So I think to sort of try and sort of look at the corporate, the relationships between corporates, auditors, and stuff like that in a very holistic way might not necessarily bring us to the best conclusion. The best conclusion for me is basically the boards, individuals in the board, Patrick Obath as chairman, Julius as my head of finance, Maui as my head of HR, whatever it is. Each of us, if we operate ethically and deliver that way, then effectively the company will continue doing the same thing the day I leave. And it does not become a key man risk anymore.
Right. Yeah. Okay, we're remaining with a few minutes. Maybe we can try and focus also on the conference next week. That is, will be happening from the 25th to 26th. You can tell us where the conference will be and what is the theme running, the conference, the theme that the conference is running under. Fatma, just briefly.
The conference will be held at the Safari Park,
Okay.
on Safari Park Hotel, 25th and 26th. And the theme is actually best practices for better business.
Best practices for better
business.
business.
Because what we are saying, this is about an inside-out approach rather than an out-in approach. And how did we reach here in order to have this conference? There are a lot of Kenyans out there who want to do the right thing. So not everybody is corrupt.
Yeah, true.
Small businesses are saying, we really want to do the right thing, but we really don't know how to. Because wherever we go, we have these roadblocks. So when we started training and showing them which is the right route to take in order to grow ethically, that is when we came up and we said, since this is a trend everywhere,
Yes.
why don't we sit together as a private sector and put it in the open and discuss it? Let the private sector itself discuss what is going on so that the private sector itself can come up with own solutions that will take us forward. And this is what we're talking about during the conference.
Thank you. All right. Let's hear from Julius as well. Maybe your parting shots.
Okay. My parting shot is we as a country have to take the bullet and decide to follow our constitution, decide to look at our aspirations as a country. If you look at our aspirations under Vision 2030, we wanted to create a prosperous country, okay, with a high quality of life. That prosperous country with a high quality of life, definitely corruption and unethical behavior is not one of them. The country that inspired us in developing Vision 2030 was Singapore. Singapore is in the league of those countries that adhere to ethical behavior. It appears probably number 1 or number 2 in the TI index in those clean countries. We need this country to grow faster economically because we need to deal with a job crisis. We need then, therefore, to create a clean society that attracts clean business. And if we attract clean business to our country, then we create jobs for our people. To me, the greatest challenge as a nation today that we face, and we must squarely solve it, is unethical and corrupt behavior. If we'd solve this problem, a lot of the other things in our society will begin to just solve themselves. So if we deal with this moral question, as I said earlier on, it's not a legal question, it's a moral question. If we deal with this moral question, then the rest of Kenya will begin to function correctly. Unfortunately, as I say earlier, and I will always say it, the church has dropped the ball.
The church has dropped the ball.
Yeah, the church has dropped the ball because then they have gotten into bed with unethical people. And the consequences of that will be felt for generations. And we will, as a society, be regretting all these missed opportunities. So we are at a critical junction, and next week's conference is about saying, let us begin somewhere. Let us begin as a critical mass somewhere and begin influencing our society to do ethical things.
Thank you.
It will take time, but we must begin somewhere.
Thank you.
And we will get there.
Right, thank you. Patrick, your final closing remarks?
I think I subscribe to that, but I'll add one more thing. What we lack in this country is, and I'll say it very bluntly, ethical leadership, completely. People, if you look at leadership, whether they have in politics, in private sector, and so forth, leaders don't want to be vulnerable. And I think if you're an ethical leader, you have to agree to be vulnerable. Well, what do I mean by that? It means that what I do is completely open and visible to everybody, so that there is no question mark or no lingering thinking that there is something in the closet behind me. The minute that happens, right, and if you ask me a question, I will tell you the answer, and that answer you can go and check, and you'll find it is okay. Not for me to say, go and ask so-and-so whether I am okay. I have got to tell you I am okay because of X, Y, and Z. Then so-and-so will say, oh, by the way, you asked so-and-so, this is true.
Yes.
It's got to be that way around. Don't fend it off to anybody else. Open up yourself as a leader completely. Open up your company completely. Be vulnerable, i.e., allow people to ask the hard questions and answer the hard questions. And that way you will build a sense of trust, and people begin to believe in the leadership that you have. And when that happens, effectively you're going to move forward. So my part in short is, let us all become ethical leaders, live it, show it, and let people question it wherever you are. And once that happens, people will walk away from you and say, this guy is okay, let's look for another guy.
Thank you.
And that is the way the country will go forward.
Thank you, Patrick Obatha, the chair of Adrian Company. Thank you for coming through. Fatima Mawi, also the CEO of Milestone Resources. Thank you for coming through. And also Julius Kipngetich, who is this Group CEO of Jubilee Insurance and also the chair of the Blue Company Project. Thank you for coming through this morning and for this salutary effort that you're trying to put forth to make sure that we are mainstreaming ethics for this particular conference that will be happening next week. That is at Safaricom from the 25th to 26th. That is next week. And of course, this is Africa Business Ethics Conference. So all leaders in the business sector will be, of course, coming to Safari Park for that particular conference. And we, of course, are doggedly following this particular development. Will be happening next week, of course, and we'll be discussing that also, the outcome of it from next week. Maybe just one or two tweets as we're winding up. We have Maxwell Matagaro briefly saying it all starts from a child's first teacher, the parents, and also Kennedy Omogi. The right people will depend on what you recruit. Is it EQ or IQ? All right. So we leave it at that as well. Thank you for your valued company. My name is Debarl. Living with Us is up next.